Hey, it's Teapot, and I'm back in Leaves. It has been a long time since I played this, and I'm so sorry. And sorry also if I'm out of breath, because I am. Kind of dragged off to a swing dancing thing. That's me opening my tea, because I'm thirsty as well. But, yeah. Gotta say, not the biggest fan of swing dancing. Because I hate the responsibility of leading, like deciding when to do turns. And I know that's not a big responsibility, but it's like, geez. I don't know what I'm talking about. I found myself in a maze of twisted alleyways, all like, "Show yourself, you bitch," I yelled at the top of my lungs. But every single time I even came close to catching her, she evaded me again and again, as if she possessed some mental map of the passageways that I did not. What's going on? Are we chasing after my sister? It took her less than 30 seconds to lose me completely. I swore in frustration, taking gasping breaths. Man, that shouldn't have happened. Maybe my lungs were totally blackened with cigarette smoke by now. I wouldn't say totally, because you're still, like, in high school or something. But yes, they're not in the best condition they could be. I just stood there, doubled over, breathing wildly. My body felt starved of oxygen, my throat burned. My field of vision quavered. And that wasn't because I was exhausted from the sprint or anything like that. China White. Now everything was clear. So Hikari was the dealer that Matsuri had spoken of. What the hell? Oh, I remember now. Hikari was the dealer of the China White to, oh my gosh, I've forgotten her name. Tsuka? Oh, I feel so bad. Oh man, it's been like a month since I played this game. Oh, I feel so bad. Then a far darker thought came to mind. Did Matsuri know that Hikari was my sister? Was that why she wove that tale of the drug dealer? To send me in her direction like this? Don't you already know? She said. Unfortunately, that possibility cannot be entirely excluded, can it now? She said. In other words, that possibility was Hikari. So my twin sister was a drug dealer. I just couldn't accept that. Tuka. That's close. And Tuka was one of her best customers, no doubt. China White. A kind of heroin. One of the strongest formulations. Once you're addicted, that's it. It's almost impossible to escape its clutches on your own strength alone. You bitch, I yelled again. I'm not gonna yell, because I think it's quiet hours in my dorm. And my fist smashed into a nearby wall. What the hell was I supposed to do now? Now what? What the hell was I going to do after this? But you know what? Anyone can put an end to everything with his own two hands. Everyone has that option. I swore violently. Because the moment the thought came to mind, I wiped it away. I might be weak, but I'm not that weak. I heard soft footsteps near to me. I looked up and saw Tuka standing before me. Her eyes were red. There were tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Tomohiro, I'm so sorry." And with that she collapsed onto the concrete, wailing. I unlocked the door to Tuka's apartment. How long had it been since I'd come here? I was carrying Tuka on my back. She felt awfully light. It was hard to even remember what happened today anymore. The city blazed with artificial light, even as night fell darkly upon it. And perhaps that was why we ended up here, like two crows coming back to their roost. Tuka's apartment. Yes, it had been 2 weeks since the last time I'd come here. We hadn't said a word to each other in this entire time. The door creaked open. I turned on the lights, then put Tuka in bed. She just lay there, motionless, her skin pale and her lifeless eyes staring blankly at the dirty floor. It was quiet. The clock ticked on the wall, the refrigerator hummed softly. The TV was on, but tuned to a dead channel, and every so often there was a burst of static. It was like time had stopped for the two of us, yet the old worn-out artifacts of our existence kept moving along, with or without us. It didn't take a single step. I wanted to run from this place. I couldn't, because I knew I had no other path before me than to extend this moment we had right now for as long as I could. I was scared, so scared that I couldn't do anything. So this, in the end, was what the cowardice known as expediency had bought me. I walked away, escaped, ducked and dipped, ignored what I felt, didn't concern me. And now it all came to this. I felt crushed, like reality had just picked me up by the throat. So it turns out that you can't always avert your eyes. And it turns out that the world does go on without you. In the time that I'd been hiding out in my room, the world kept spinning, and the people kept coming, and the decisions kept getting made, and now all the things I didn't do and didn't say were crashing down on me. It was endless. Tuka, for instance, had made her own choice long ago. She'd gained something, but she'd lost herself in the process. I'd just been blind to it. I'd just been covering my eyes. And if I apologize, she whispered, then a long, long sigh. If I apologize, then will you forgive me? If I apologize, then will we go back to the way we were before? She mused. I really wish she was saying those words to someone else. Unfortunately for me, there wasn't a single other soul around. Her voice was choked with tears now. If I apologize, will I become happy? If I apologize, will I be able to quit the drugs? If I apologize, will I be able to change who and what I am? Her tears dripped down her cheeks and onto her bedsheets. She went on. If I apologize, She finally looked up at me. Her face was so stained with tears and pain that I took a step back. She looked like a lost child, not a grown woman. Well, yeah. Make love to me again. Tell me you love me again, she murmured. Her voice was trembling so hard that it was hard to hear a lot of what she said, but I understood everything anyhow. Then she howled. I know. I can't do this anymore. I know. I can't go back anymore. I know. I've always known. I shouldn't do this. I've always known. For the longest time now. I'm nothing. A big failure. But her hair was so beautiful, as disheveled as it was. No, Tuka, you are not nothing. Why would you, with all your charm and all your loveliness, say such hurtful things about yourself? Except I knew the answer to that question. Like me, Tuka was fighting against herself. And like me, she didn't really care about what other people thought or said. Hers was a hard life, a sad one, an empty one without possibility of recompense, a long shot against impossible odds. She didn't have to apologize to anyone, but now she found it impossible to meet the gaze of the judgmental strangers on the streets any longer. Tuka is so weak, is she not? So I don't know if you can hear this, but there's very loud people in the hallway. So maybe it's not quiet hours. Those were Matsuri's words to me. Only now did I feel as if I finally understood what she'd meant. Matsuri had said that not with coldness, or with indifference, or with anger, but with all the love and affection she'd had for one of her closest childhood friends. We needed a hideous kind of strength in order to be able to look somebody else in the eye. Hideous, because no noble thing like intelligence or kindness or altruism entered into it. Strength, because if you didn't have it, the world would eat you alive. So much easier to be eaten alive by the world than to be a cog in this great machine, never looking past your own nose, doing what you need to do, turning until one day you just rust away and die, soon to be replaced, never having had to be faced with questions like, what am I doing, or why am I here, or most painful of all, who am I? Ignorance is bliss. But none of us, Tuka, Matsuri, me, could do that. We were fools. Tomohiro, she whimpered. Please, oh please. Somehow or another, I found myself standing right in front of Tuka by now. Please, here, take me. Even if it's all a lie. Make me believe, she stammered. And gently, as if it were the most fragile thing in her world, I said her name. Tuka. I sat beside her, grasped her shoulders, drew her close to me. And I kissed her as gently as I was able. She did not resist. She just closed her eyes, opened her mouth, whatever I wanted. I could taste the salt of her tears. Tuka, I whispered, and she called my name haltingly in response. I kissed her again, this time much more deeply, possessively, so she and everyone else in the world would know that she belonged to me. Her eyes fluttered open. She made a tiny, muffled, contented noise. And I could see that there wasn't a single tear in her eyes anymore. I felt impossibly happy, for I'd stopped her tears, even if it was for this moment alone. Even if the world were to come crashing down around us tomorrow, I caressed her lower lip, and then gently thrust my tongue into her mouth. Her tongue met mine gladly, and yielded all its secrets to me. The sound of our kissing surrounded us. Usually this would have embarrassed me, but today I didn't care. When I heard it, my heart rejoiced. And not out of lust or desire either. It was out of something far better and far more warming than that. Tuka let out a contented sigh from the corner of her mouth. Then she focused right back on me. Trust shone in her eyes. I felt how warm her body was against mine, how joined her mouth was with mine. And I felt a correctness. Like God was in his heaven, all was right with the world, so precious and heavy that I wanted to faint. So I lived her tongue with my own. Tuka responded to these gentle motions with warm, yielding motions of her own, hugging my tongue with hers. I could taste her. She could taste me, and this was just right. I pulled my lips away from hers at last, and took a deep, gasping breath. I looked into her eyes. She was breathing just as heavily as I was, and she called my name. Tears started forming in her eyes again as I watched. Don't cry now, okay? I said, holding her close. Okay, I heard her whisper. My hands went to her breasts. For a moment, I remembered the last time I'd done this to her. It'd been so rough. but not this time. She moaned quietly the moment my hands touched the fabric covering her roundness, and she startled a little, but only a little. Then she looked up at me expectantly. No bra, as usual. I trapped her nipples between the fabric and my fingers, and I played with them, rolling them back and forth, pinching them very softly, making circular motions that jostled and encompassed all of her breasts, not just the nipples. "Yes," she murmured sweetly. "Oh yes, please. Oh, please." So I kept at it, and as any man would do in that situation. She kept making approving noises. I leaned in close and gently sucked on one of her earlobes. She let out a yelp, first of surprise, then of surrender, and finally of pleasure. It was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. And when her name came to my lips again, I couldn't help myself. I put my arm around her back. Obediently, for she knew what I wanted, she put all her weight against it, entrusting her body to me. Gently, slowly, I laid her back in bed. I gazed down on her. She gazed up at me. No more tears. I eased her shirt up. The swells of her breasts came into view, and they were completely exposed. When the fabric hissed past her nipples, Tuka smiled up at me and waited. What else could I do? I obliged, brought my head right up against her left breast and sucked on her nipple. She let out a cry of unadulterated pleasure. I just continued sucking on her warm, soft teat as if my life depended on it. Every so often, my tongue laved the top of her nipple. Her skin was now flushed all over, and seemed to grow warmer by the second, warmer than I'd ever felt her before. And as my mouth lovingly worshipped her left breast, my left hand did the same to her right. After a while, I switched sides and kept going. I felt her panting and moaning, begging for more, surrendering herself more deeply to me with every passing second, trusting. So with my right hand I caressed her stomach, then her abdomen, then reached for her privates. My hand brushed against her panties and encountered moisture. She was already dripping wet. Good. Good. I pulled aside her panties and spread apart her labia, gently, with my middle finger. Moisture coated my finger, filled my pores like water fills a spoon. "Yes," she cries out. "Oh, Tomo here. Yes, keep going. Oh, please. Oh, please." So I did exactly as she asked, kept going. My middle finger brushed up against a stiff nubbin, so her clitoris was just as engorged with blood as my penis was. It hurt, actually. My jeans were tight, and my penis was hard and bulging. Every part of me wanted to push her down, enter her immediately, and spend my seed inside of her. But I did no such thing. Instead, I slid my middle finger through her slit and inside of her. She sucked me right in, without any resistance whatsoever. I could feel her tunnel walls and her pussy lips tightening around me with pleasure, and I could hear her panting and moaning with the same emotion. So I felt around, worked her like an instrument. It was warm inside, so warm it was hot, and so soft it was like butter against the skin of my finger. I began moving my finger back and forth, in and out. Every time it slid in, Tuka moaned. Every time it slid out, Tuka moaned. Her voice was high and sweet, made just for me. I could feel her vagina clutching my finger, milking it rhythmically, harder and harder. I sped up the piston action of my finger. Tuka's entire body reacted to this. Her legs spread wider. Her hands clenched into fists. She arched her back and began keening with pleasure. She was close to coming now. Very close. I stopped caressing her breast with my other hand, and then started fingering her clitoris instead. She cried out helplessly. One last thrust, one last caress. Every part of her seemed to tighten around my finger, and the sound of her orgasm, torn from her lips, was indeed the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Her juices had so soaked her panties that they were dripping down, making little spots on the bedsheets. She gasped for breath, her little ribcage heaving in and out with exertion. I pulled my finger out of her, and it was as if I'd unstoppered a bottle. Her juices just spilt out onto the bedsheets, darkening them with moisture. And I said to her, "It's not over yet, Tuka." "Huh?" she responded, only half there. Both my hands went to her sodden panties. Then I gently started pulling them down. Tuka obediently raised her hips. Her panties slid off eagerly. I tossed the soggy garment onto the floor. And then I stabbed into her again, this time with 2 fingers. She let out a little cry. Her back arched for a moment. She was still sensitive from the orgasm. But then she relaxed again and looked up at me expectantly. So I pulled my fingers out of her, unzipped my jeans, threw them aside, tore off my underwear, got on top of her, and brushed up against her wet, glistening slit with my stiffened penis. She looked up at me expectantly. "Oh, come on, really?" I was so happy that nothing was being shown. Okay, I'm gonna end it here. So, yeah, thanks for watching. And, this will continue next time.